I think it's safe to say that browsing DeviantArt and some of my other series did not offer the most in-depth of critiques. So I was thinking to myself, well, I guess I should do something with more emphasis on that. I'm just going to give some more detailed feedback on the stuff you guys have sent me. It's like browsing DeviantArt, but slightly less stupid. Let's go! When I looked at this, I first noticed there were many structural issues. The right side of this drawing led me to believe that maybe it was kind of malformed on purpose, especially with the lowered ear and the bumpiness of the snout. But I'm not totally sure that's the case. If it's not, I do have some ideas to make it more structurally sound in general. This is a 3/4 portrait of some kind of purple animal with cartoonish furry eyes. The left side of the snout seems to protrude far more than necessary for this view, and the right side did not seem to take up enough of the face. The right ear looks like it's drooping onto the side of their face, when it should really be at about an equal height to the left ear. One suggestion I have is to study this view from real life. Yeah, I know it's very cartoonish in style, but simplifying the structures that seem to be trouble areas can help. I found some photos of dogs with views that are pretty close to what I think this artist was trying to achieve, so that might be helpful. I don't know why the signature is directly on top of the drawing. It's kind of distracting, but this might be because of past experiences with art theft. I don't know. The last thing is simply cleanup of the canvas they were working on. There's all kinds of white streaks near the borders that could have been cropped out, or the gradient could have been put on top of them. The color scheme overall is a bit bland, but I like that there's a definite direction that it's going for. This is a profile view of an OC named... I'm not even gonna try. The first thing that stands out to me is a slight misunderstanding of some anatomy. The ear just looks kind of rushed, and the upper half of the neck should be bent outward so that it's parallel to the other side. This makes it look more like a tube rather than a bizarre tapering connection. A smaller thing is that this line along the cheek seems very unnecessary to me, along with the lines in the neck. These kinds of things are more effectively defined in shading rather than line work. With this, it kind of just looks like someone pinched out the skin. While there are moderate issues in the anatomy, proportionally, it isn't that bad. The distances between the parts of the face is not perfect, but with some more practice, it can get pretty accurate. And depending on what kind of style they're going for, these proportions are manageable. Aside from the anatomy, you have this weird shading throughout the piece. The way this is shaded looks more like fur than human skin. The way the shadows are placed seems a bit random, and sometimes the way the light hits the skin doesn't make much sense. For example, this lid area along the chin is off to the side, while the nose and forehead seem to be lit head-on. It's also very straight when it should dip and curve around the form of the chin. This is where understanding the planes of the face is important, and studying them for a bit can vastly improve beginner portrait art. The highlights seem more white and intense than they should be. If they want to go for a more semi-realistic look, which is what I'm guessing they're going for from the attempts at proper anatomy, I would suggest some variations in tone for the skin. Some reds and pinks around the eyes and cheeks would be a good place to start experimenting with. If they are going to go with a semi-realistic approach, I would probably just eliminate the black lines altogether and separate parts with shading. Next we have this Spongebob and Bendy from Bendy and the Ink Machine fan art. Okay, I see one major way I can fix this. See just a little here, and... see, that's much better. This one caught my eye mostly for the muted colors, the effective transition between those colors, the dynamic and varied shapes of the dead flowers, and the animal skull. Because who doesn't love a good animal skull? Of course, the artist admits that the skull is lopsided. Maybe this is a consequence of not blocking in the forms first. The very top in between the sockets seems a bit sunken in, and should probably be more rounded. One thing I would have liked to see is the skull being nestled in with these flowers. They kind of did this with the eye sockets, but the contour remains unbroken throughout the rest of the skull. If they had some of the flowers overlapping the skull, this could give it a little bit more depth, but it doesn't have to be any extreme overlap in case it starts to take over the skull too much. As an internet connoisseur, it is my job to eliminate any anime that crosses my path by calling it gay, and so I shall do so. This is gay. With that out of the way, let's analyze this. So of course, this is supposed to be some kind of chibi
Chibi.
Drawing with elements of the artist's own style. The thing that caught my eye as kind of odd was the cheek here. It looked a little bit too exaggerated, and that's when I realized the line work is extra thick around this area for some reason. Further up, we have this stroke of highlight, which comes across as very unnecessary. They seem to have a sufficient amount of highlights underneath this, and it doesn't follow any of the shapes of the clumps. In the hand, the spaces between the fingers are unnaturally round and far apart. It kind of looks more like a rake than a hand. Some more angular finger spaces might help with this. When it comes to the ice, I feel like the line work for it should be much lighter, at least closer to the main colors used, if there needs to be any line work at all. Also, there needs to be some more cleanup. I get this may seem like an obvious or nitpicky thing, but just going over your work to find any stray marks just makes it look so much more professional, and a lot of people miss this. Overall, this artist does seem to have a grasp of not making an anime character's face look uncanny and dead, so that's a good place to be. There just needs to be some better understanding of the rest of the body and some more polishing. When I first saw this, I thought that the face was kind of pasty and flat, but then I realized this was a BTS member, and I was like, oh yeah, they do kind of look like that in real life. In fact, I even found the original reference image. I noticed several things when it came to the shading. The planes of the face aren't very defined, especially at this area where the nose meets the area above the top lip. Even at this angle where it's facing the light source, there should be some shading, which I notice they kind of have, but it isn't dark enough. I feel like this generally affects the rest of the shading because there's overblending and instances of not being brave enough to make the colors darker to get more contrast. Around the eyes we have a band of dark lines, but this really only should be applied to the top and some of the sides. The bottom of the eyes are kind of brownish and much thinner. In fact, the idea of having darker lines for the tops of the eyes is present in a lot of styles, not just realism. I suppose it gives the impression of being more lifelike. Down here we have this strange bump in the jawline, which is present in the reference image, but is much more subtle. Also, if you look closer here, you'll notice that there isn't just one band of color under the jawline, but a few colors containing variations of darkness and thickness. Overall, they got most of the general shapes right, but there needs to be some more attention to the planes of the face and some deeper contrast in the shadows and shading. Anyway, this has been Critiquing Stuff. My name is Solar Sands, and goodbye.